ऐगिरिनन्दिनि नन्दितमेधिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दनुते गिरिवरविन्ध्यशिरोधिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Namaskaram. Welcome back. Like I promised you earlier, I'm going to do 3-4 episodes on marriages and how churches control marriages using Christian doctrines. Church is a breathing and a living entity which is in the business of controlling human beings through religion. For a church business empire to grow, it needs people who can contribute in cash, kind and both. For this church business empire to expand steadily, it not only needs cash inflow, but it also needs a healthy growth in human capital. This human capital is a crucial lifeline both to financially support the church and to recruit more people to expand the territory of the church. It takes a lot of time, effort and money to recruit a steadily contributing member. Once recruited, this member has to be locked in so that he or she can grow and multiply within this church's community. It helps if you compare church to a tribe which is constantly striving to expand its territory while keeping tabs on people to ensure that no member thinks of leaving the fold. Many draconian processes and methods which are all doctrinally supported by Bible are used to ensure that the tribe members never think of leaving the church. One such process that is readily available for church is to take charge and control the marriages of its members and their progeny for perpetuity. How exactly does church get to take control of an individual's marriage? An answer to this question opens many cans of worms. I will shed ample light on this for you all to see the dark world of manipulation, exploitation and victimization that go into the marriages that are manufactured by the church. What I am presenting to you comes from observing church operations for over 40 years. I will be giving some examples of the marriages that I have seen which are the handiwork of church leaders. Before I go into those details, let me first give you some biblical background for you all to have a context of how church establishes its authority to meddle with marriages of individuals. Marriage, as we know, is the oldest institution on earth. However, for God of the Bible, marriage or bringing together a man and a woman was more of an afterthought. If you look at the creation story of the Bible, we see that the God of the Bible's blueprint of creation didn't really have any great plans about how to multiply human race. This God created all the other living forms from thin air by saying, let there be this, let there be that. However, God used the dust from the earth to make an image of man and breathed into his nostrils to turn this lump of mud into a living being. Let me add, this man was made in the image of God, if that is any kind of incentive. Now, after this lump of mud came alive, Bible God quickly gave some instructions to this man on how to conduct himself in this garden. The name of this man was Adam, by the way. In the do's and don'ts list that God gave, the topmost rule was that Adam should not eat a fruit from one tree which is called the tree of knowledge. Knowledge that will tell him to know good from evil. As a matter of fact, God threatened Adam of death if Adam disobeyed and ate this fruit. Don't ask me how Adam knew about what dying meant. Remember, he just came alive and all that he saw around him was the Creator and a garden with all kinds of trees, birds and animals. So I'm not sure if the threat of death for eating the fruit of knowledge made any sense to Adam. After God gave these death threats to Adam, he kind of gained his composure and said that he had some plans for Adam, as God felt that it was not good for man to be alone and wanted to make a helper for Adam. For now, Adam was supposed to take care of God's creation. However, Adam seems to have happily settled into this role of taking care of God's creation and had no complaints. He didn't express a need for a companion. It was God who felt sad for Adam that he didn't have any help to do all these housekeeping jobs. Moved with great compassion and love for Adam, God gave a companion to Adam, and we call her Eve. Now, here is a very interesting thing we need to note about how the woman was created. To create a woman, God ripped open Adam's body and pulled out a rib from Adam and used that rib to make the woman. If God is the Father who created both Adam and Eve, then Adam and Eve have to be siblings, isn't it? Also, since Eve was made from body part of Adam, wouldn't Eve become Adam's offspring? So did God of the Bible give Adam Eve as wife, who was actually a body part of Adam? How exactly did the Holy God of Bible author this incestuous relationship? We will leave these questions for Bible scholars to answer. My Hindu friends and relatives, please make note of this weird stuff from Bible and make sure you remind Christians, especially those who get ready to judge Hindus at the drop of a hat, acting high and mighty with dubious claims that God of the Bible is holy. Getting back to story of Adam and Eve, the woman's creation is an afterthought for God. Interestingly, it was Eve who instinctively had a desire to gain wisdom. And it is the woman's desire to seek out wisdom that has completely put brakes on this Bible God's plan for his creation. I will talk more about women and Bible in another episode. But for this episode, let us focus on the institution of marriage as it relates to Bible and Christianity. While God's plan was to use Adam and Eve as the caretakers for Garden of Eden, this unexpected twist in the story brought about by eating the fruit of knowledge turned God's plans topsy-turvy. This couple were not only driven out from the Garden of Eden, but were also cursed by Bible God with all kinds of things for merely eating a fruit, that too the fruit of knowledge. The woman was cursed that she will have severe pain during childbirth. For those women who don't know, the painful labor during childbirth is actually Bible God's curse on you. The curse that Bible God gave to Adam was that Adam will have to work hard to feed himself and his family. So for those men who are proud that they are working hard to support themselves and their family, please remember that it was the God of the Bible who cursed you to do hard work. Continuing with the story of Adam and Eve, this couple, which was cursed by Bible God, was obviously heartbroken and sought out the companionship of each other once they were left alone to manage their own affairs outside the Garden of Eden. Once outside the strict watch of this God, the couple explored all different aspects of being human. And surprisingly, this exploration of each other is what we now know as the process of conception, and eventual childbirth, and the subsequent whole 9 yards of populating the earth with human beings. This populating of earth by human beings is more of a deviation from Bible God's plan, as all of this was a consequence of Adam and Eve eating the fruit of knowledge, which made them aware of a whole different dimension of their existence, which in this case was their sexuality. So this coming together of a man and a woman is not something that Bible God sees favorably. Marriage is viewed by the Bible as more of a necessary evil and something that needs to be closely monitored and controlled. This Bible God's contempt for institution of marriage was so intense that he couldn't allow his son Jesus to be born to normally married couple, and that perhaps is one of the reasons for this virgin birth story of Jesus among many other reasons. It is little wonder as to why New Testament sets out that many rules and regulations about marriage. Reading 1 Corinthians chapter 7, will help you understand the Christianity's take on marriage as laid out by Saint Paul. As a matter of fact, Saint Paul and his letters make up half of the New Testament. Out of the 27 books in the New Testament, only 4 books talk about the life and works of Jesus. Almost half, 13 books out of 27 in the New Testament were believed to have been authored by Apostle Paul. In some sense, it is the commandments laid out by Saint Paul that Christians use more than the teachings of Jesus Christ. Saint Paul is believed to be a bachelor, and ironically, he had a lot of advice to give on the institution of marriage. He did say that by all means people should try to remain as bachelors and spinsters like him. He went as far as to say that it is good for a man not to have any sexual relationship with a woman. Paul allowed people to marry just so that they don't become sexually immoral. There is some very graphic stuff in this passage from the Bible, and I am not going to go any further into this. Of course, Saint Paul also said marriage is honorable in all, but never explained why marriage is honorable. Christians make an overkill with this verse and come up with their own concoctions, and almost every Christian wedding invitation uses this verse as an ornament. Let us look at the text surrounding this verse to see if this verse, that is a cliche in Christian world, has any further details on how marriage is honorable. Alas, in the same breath that Saint Paul mentioned that marriage is honorable, he also talked about whoremongers. The reason I am giving you this biblical background is for you all to understand the context of what I am going to talk about. Marriage is not for personal growth as we see in Sanatana Dharma.
Sita Kalyana Vaibhogame Kalyana Vaibhogame.
But it is a process that is put in place in Bible to make sure that young men do not turn into whoremongers and adulterers. The slippery slope of having young men and women get married is that once men and women start getting involved with each other, there is a danger that God of the Bible will be put on a back seat. Hence, marriage in Christianity is viewed both suspiciously and skeptically, as the danger of falling out of love with Jesus increases by 1,000-folds when people get busy with their spouses and their children after marriages. So churches have been dabbling with people's marriages for as long as Christianity existed. Churchgoers are constantly brainwashed to believe that the sole purpose of their marriage is to bring glory to God. They bring glory to God as couple and later on as families by building God's kingdom. Since marriages need to be built for the glory of God, it is now all up to the church pastor to do the matchmaking. In the context of Indian Christians, the church took the place of families, elders, relatives, village heads who typically take care of the responsibility of getting the young married. In the church that my dad got stuck in, the church's founding family and some who are closely connected with this family were the ones who took charge of conducting the marriages of the church members and also the children of the church members. Church members whose marriages are in the control of these church leaders fall into one of the 3 categories. The first category is the marriages of young people who got recruited into this church from another Christian group. The category 2 is young Hindus who got recruited by this church and got converted to Christianity. Category 3 is young children of the church members who got converted to Christianity from Hindu families. Let me give you the process of how this entire marriage is initiated and conducted in a typical church like that of my dad. Like I said earlier, only a select group of church leaders had the authority vested in them from the powers that be to do this matchmaking. Now take for example one brother Joe. This Joe is a real man, by the way. He died 5 years ago, leaving behind a wretched family whose members are at each other's throats to get the pie of this church's properties and wealth. For those that are thinking that this is some fringe group, no, this is not a small church. This church proudly celebrated its 85th anniversary. From this church's website, you can see that it has its centers in 27 out of the 28 states in India. This church has thousands of centers all over India, and each of these centers is managed by someone who is called a layman evangelist. So who are these layman evangelists? The answer to this question will take us to the very roots of this church and its nefarious activities from the time of its inception. This Joe happened to be the whole and soul of this church for more than 60 years. We were told that this man was some kind of a boy preacher who started his preaching career at the age of 15. Joe's parents were ordinary school teachers who lived in a small town called Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh. This family claimed that it had some mysterious call from God to move to Madras to start a church. That mysterious God's call is the first step in the process of building a church empire. An individual or a family makes a public announcement about their plans to start a church by claiming that God spoke to them through His word to start a church. The God's word that Joe's family claims to have received is the following verse. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in His time. I need to add some fun facts here as to how a verse from the Bible gets to become a personal message from God to an individual. We were taught in this church that after a person prays about a certain issue, he should open the Bible, and whatever portion of the Bible that the person's eye falls on is supposed to be taken as the message from God. This nonsense never made sense to me even as a child. My own dad, who completely bought into this madness, has a collection of verses from the Bible that he claims to be messages from God for him from time to time. The reason I know this in such great detail is because my dad also kept claiming, like Joe's family, that he also got a call from God and used to show some fancy text from the Bible as a proof for it. My poor dad had only terrifying texts from the Bible that he got as personal messages, and it was traumatic every time he shared these messages with us. One such verse comes to mind, as he always reminded us of this. Apparently, this message from God came to him when he wanted to take up a job and was told to find God's will to decide whether or not to accept that job offer. Here is that verse that he claimed to have gotten to dissuade him from taking up that job. This was a job he and his family needed very desperately to get over the many financial problems the family was facing, as my dad was not adequately employed at that time, even after successfully finishing his engineering degree from a premier institutions. Here is that verse. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. If you are determined to go to Egypt, then the sword you fear will overtake you there, and the famine you dread will follow you into Egypt, and there you will die. As my anger and wrath have been poured out on those who lived in Jerusalem, so will my wrath be poured out on you when you go to Egypt. You will be a curse and an object of horror and an object of reproach. You will never see this place again. Apparently, this is the verse that my dad got. Perhaps, just perhaps, if my dad did not get the above threat from God, our family would have been saved from a lot of misery by moving away from the clutches of this church and Christianity, as taking up this job would have moved him away from this church mafia. To this day, my dad lives in the terror of this God and cannot wrap his mind around how his own daughter is not afraid of this terror-inspiring God. This is another story for another day. Today we will keep our focus on Joe, his family, and their God's call drama to build a church empire by using people whose marriages they controlled. Joe's family moved to Madras to start the church after making a public announcement about their move to their families and friends in Kakinada. The stage was set for this family to start a church. So this family's empire building ambition was all fueled up by the promise of the Bible verse, and it was time for the mysterious hand of God to help this family in this empire building enterprise. It is interesting to note here that the mysterious hand of God was the hand of none other than that of the big brothers from England who were actively building churches in the Madras province with the auspices of British government, which was in its last leg before India got independence. The church empire building was the mission of Joe's family. Joe's parents did not waste a single minute. They worked with singular goal of herding people to build the church and the business. Joe and his younger siblings, especially his sister Kamala, played a crucial role. From a very young age, they knew how to hunt down people and bring them to the church that their parents started. Their hunting grounds were college hostels, and their specialty was to gather unemployed youth, both girls and boys, to bring them to their parents' church. This Joe's dad's name was Nagabatula Daniel, and this family dropped the Nagabatula family name and reinvented itself as Daniel family. Like I told you in an earlier episode, this church started by this Joe's parents is the second generation evangelical church that went around and revived people from dead denominational churches and recruited young children from these traditional church members to wean them away from their families and their original churches. So this church's member base from the time of its inception was the estranged youth, whether they were recruited from the college hostels or as an after crop of the so-called revival meetings meant to revive the youth in the dead churches, to drag them away from their families and bring them into Joe's family's fold. The mysterious hand of the big brothers in England kept guiding this family, pulling strings remotely after leaving the shores of India, and was the constant companion to build this church's empire during its formative stage. All of what I am writing is based on the accounts mentioned in the biographies and autobiographies authored by this Joe. Within a few years of starting its own family church, this Joe's family managed to have a good group of unmarried young men and women who virtually cut all ties with their families and came to live in the Bible college hostel that this family started as part of his church empire building. These young people were all recent graduates from colleges waiting to join the workforce. But Joe's family had a different agenda for these young people. They joined a different workforce, and that workforce was Joe's family's church empire building workforce. The young men became full-time Bible college students, while the young girls usually went and worked as teachers in local schools. These Bible colleges till this day have no accreditation from any credible institution. There is no fixed curriculum, also no fixed time frame to graduate these students from these so-called Bible schools. It was all up to Joe's family to teach these young people whatever Bible theology the family thought was important for these young people to learn, to open sub-centers of this church. Some stayed in these Bible colleges as long as 15 years, and their exit from this Bible college happened when Joe's family thought it was time to conduct the marriages of these young people whose lives they controlled completely. Now this matchmaking has its own trademark. Joe or one of his prominent family member is the one who will suggest a boy to a girl and vice versa. I heard numerous horror stories about this. In some instances, the girl or the boy did not even have any information other than the fact that Joe is now ready to initiate the process of marriage. Joe was a con artist of the worst kind. While he imposed these kinds of strange rules of not even disclosing to these young people whom they were asked to marry and pray about it, Joe flaunted his own love notes he wrote to his fiancée in his own autobiography. And no one dared to question him, as the people were brainwashed to believe that questioning Joe or his family member was tantamount to touching the apple of God's eye. This con artist Joe instructed the boy and the girl to pray and find out God's will and bring back a Bible verse to confirm that they got God's will. Now, here is a morphed threat that is inherent in this process. The very fact that Joe or his family member initiated this process is because of the simple reason that this marriage is what the church and its first family wills. So all of this finding God's will is just so that Joe and his family can wash off their hands if something were to go wrong with this marriage in the future. Most of these young people got recruited while they were in their early to mid 20s. And they all had to wait for 7 to 10 years to come of age to get married in this church. The families of these young people have been completely removed from the picture. And these young people were now under the complete control of Joe, his widowed mother, and his all-powerful sister Kamala. Joe's dad, the original founder of this church, did not last long and died sometime in the 60s, which made Joe the de facto head of the church. The unmarried young women were controlled by Joe's widowed mother and his sister. They called the widow Mother Daniel or Ammagaru, and the sister was called Kamalakka. These two women called the shots along with Joe to manufacture couples who would toe the line of this church at all times and at all costs. When Joe's family members put a proposal in front of these young people, who were well into their 30s, it was like an offer they could not afford to refuse. If any of them brought in a Bible verse saying that they did not get God's will, that person was pushed back in line and had to wait indefinitely. Cut off from their families and alienated from the world outside, these young people submitted themselves to the will of Joe and his family, while deluding themselves that all of what they are enduring was to do the will of God. The young people thus married were sent to expand this church's empire in new territories. These couples were expected to build this church empire with no financial or minimum financial support from Joe and his family. The men who were trained in the so-called Bible colleges were the lay evangelists who built and expanded the church empire. The couple thus sent were told to exercise faith to take care of their own family needs. What this meant was that Joe and his family did not even have the financial responsibility of supporting these families. Then how did this couple sustain themselves? The wives of these laymen evangelists were the breadwinners of the family. Joe's family's blueprint of manufacturing these evangelist couple to expand their church empire had all of these details worked out to perfection. The women had anyway been used to working in schools as teachers, even while they were getting trained under Joe's mother and sister. So they quietly settled into the role of becoming the breadwinners for the family, while their husbands built the kingdom of God. Slowly but steadily, these couples built LEF churches, employing all of the proselytizing techniques and methods that they learned for years from Joe and his family. Joe's family was extremely shrewd in devising processes and systems to ensure that all of the money that is raised locally by these evangelists is all sent to headquarters. This headquarters, by the way, was in Madras and was the control room from which Joe and his family operated, keeping close watch on operations of all the LEF centers where the trained layman evangelists were toiling. The church communities grew steadily. However, the draconian rules that Joe and his family imposed on evangelists and their families ensured that these families remained poor and needy and never really got to enjoy the prosperity that Joe and his family enjoyed. Joe rose the ranks in the wider Christian ecosystem and awarded himself the status of international preacher. Joe, who married a woman of his choice, lived life king size, while duping all his wards that he and his family made great sacrifices to build the kingdom of God. Joe's prosperity remained a heavenly secret that was carefully hid away from all of these minions who scraped and sent the very last pie that they collected as tithes and offerings from the members that they recruited to become Christians. Joe managed to take his pregnant wife to foreign countries to ensure that 3 out of his 4 children were born in these foreign countries so that they can get foreign citizenships. 2 of them were born in US and became US citizens. Joe with his family lived in a luxurious home in Kunur, a hill station in Tamil Nadu. Joe also had obsession for foreign cars and managed to have a fleet of cars imported from Germany for his family's use. All of this was 50 years ago, while this church was still in its infancy. That gives you an idea of how much money was collected even in those days. As the first crop of evangelists steadily worked hard to expand this church empire, Joe and his family's greed to accumulate lands increased. Most of the money was locally raised by respective laymen evangelists. In many cases, church members were duped into bequeathing their own homes and lands to this church. I personally know a dozen families who gave up all their lands and homes to this church only to be kicked out of their own houses and lands years later when they got into a tiff with Joe and his family. Many children whose parents gave away their houses and lands to this church sought legal help but couldn't win the cases in courts, as Joe's family had the financial muscle to employ the most crooked lawyers to fight these cases. Both Nalini Chidambaram and her son Karthi Chidambaram were on the payroll of this Joe's family's church. For those that don't know, Nalini Chidambaram is the wife of P. Chidambaram, an ex-finance minister in the corrupt Congress regime. P. Chidambaram spent over 100 days in Tihar jail on charges of corruption, and this corrupt lawyer family was on Joe's family's payroll. While Joe's mother and his sister watched over the growing empire like hawks by spreading their tentacles all over Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, Joe with his family of 5 children moved to US. Joe's 5 children went to an elite boarding school called the Hebron School in the hill station in Ooty before moving to the US. This school served the children of so-called missionaries who left their children in this boarding school while they did their missionary work in different parts of India and abroad. All of the 5-star life of Joe and his family was possible because of the tithes and offering that were meticulously collected by the layman evangelists, the foot soldiers who worked to build this church empire. Joe moved his family of 5 children to US in the late 70s or early 80s. Neither Joe nor his wife was gainfully employed in the US, but they managed to live in the US ever since. All of his 5 children got some kind of university education in the US, and they bluffed their way into saying that they lived by faith, which is a clear admission that they lived off the tithes and offering of people which was collected by these layman evangelists. This conman Joe, for all the misery that he brought upon innumerable couples, did get a taste of his own medicine, as he couldn't employ his family building expertise to provide stable family lives to his own daughters. Joe's oldest daughter, who goes by name Liz Van Camp, alias Betty Daniel, is into her 3rd marriage. Joe's youngest daughter, who is in her late 40s, is still officially a spinster who is rumored to have had several live-in relationships over the years. John Daniel, the oldest of Joe's sons, who was born in the US, is now the official head of this church empire. John Daniel is married to a German woman and has 5 daughters who are famously known as Daniel 5. For 3 generations, this Daniel family has been living off the money that is collected by poor Indians, whom these lay evangelists have been recruiting to make them contributing members of this church. Joe's parents raised 4 children, and all of them and their spouses were not gainfully employed. They lived off the church's money, that is the first generation. Joe raised his family of 5 children, and his younger brother Francis had 3 children, and one of his sisters did not have any children, the other one had 2 children, and all of them grew eating the tithes and offerings. Joe's children ate the most resources as they went to elite schools while they lived in India and had to be supported once they moved to US. In US, Joe's family needed money in dollars. This is the 2nd generation of Joe's family that was supported using the money raised by lay evangelists. Joe's other 2 sons were not keen to be part of the church empire that Joe's family built. John Daniel, who is unemployed for the major part of his adult life, has the largest family of all. He has 5 daughters and is the one who is still living off the money raised by lay evangelists. He is the most expensive of the Daniel family members, both because of the size of his family, who are all raised in the US, and also because of the fancy pursuits of his daughters, the Daniel 5, to release Christian music in some sophisticated studio setting in the US. Their lack of talent can only be compensated using the expensive professional services to make this abysmally low quality music performance into some kind of palatable music. These 5 girls are also being educated in US universities, and all of their grand lifestyle is made possible by the hard work of layman evangelist families who pump money to support this family, irrespective of whatever part of world this family chooses to live. This is the 3rd generation of this Joe's family that is living off the tithes and offerings of poor people. In addition to all this, Joe also had 2 major heart surgeries in the US. And those of us who live in the US know that it is not a cheap proposition if a person doesn't have employer-sponsored medical insurance. John Daniels today sits on $1 million+ property in Michigan, which is disguised as a church that has no more than 10 to 15 members attending. Of these 10 to 15 members, 6 of them are John Daniel's wife and his 5 children. John Daniel, his wife and his mother are the board of directors of this branch of this church in US that is registered as a non-profit. Thanks to faithful layman evangelists who made all things possible through Christ for Joe and his family to live life king size. I am sure you now understand how important it is to have layman evangelists to build a church empire. It is these layman evangelist couples who play a crucial role in building this church empire. These couples are manufactured by church leaders through church controlled marriages. When Joe's family conducts a marriage, it never is in the best interest of the young people who are getting married. At the heart of this matchmaking is the singular goal of manufacturing couples who will remain loyal to this church for generations. These couples had to remain loyal to Joe's family while actively working to recruit more people to become contributing members of this church. And these families had very minimum resources to do this. Some of these marriages were hits while others were misses. Hits are when the couple remain loyal to this church empire to hand over the destiny of their children and their children's children in perpetuity to Joe's family members. Misses are when the families and individuals jolted themselves away from this church's bondage. Many young people and their marriages were used to further the cause of this church empire building. Many families were hurt and individuals were destroyed as their lives and marriages were completely controlled by this church. Many bridges were burnt, many hearts were broken, many families lost their children, many dreams were shattered, many lives were ruined. I remain a witness to many horror stories. Of all the horror stories I heard, one stuck with me. This particular woman was recruited by Kamala and was made to cut off all ties with her family and went through this process of finding God's will to get married to the person of Joe's family's choice 2 times. First time she got God's will to get married to the guy that Joe's family chose, it was a miss. On the day of the wedding, the most tragic thing happened. People were all gathered in the church waiting for the wedding ceremony to begin. The woman was dressed up as bride and was waiting to walk to the altar. To everybody's horror, the groom never showed up. The groom who said that he got God's will to marry this woman went missing when it was time for him to show up for his own wedding. The girl's family members, who were mere spectators, watched all of this helplessly. They were reduced to becoming spectators. The bigger tragedy was that the girl's family couldn't rescue their daughter out of the clutches of Joe and his family even after this devastating incident. This particular woman, who later got married to another man that Joe's family chose, finally quit the church in the most dishonorable of circumstances. Her crime was that she took control of her own daughter's wedding and crossed the line that Joe and his family drew for the inmates of this church. Only when Joe and his family unleashed a full-fledged maligning campaign against her husband as a retaliation for wanting to get their daughter married to a person of their choice did this woman realize how evil this Joe's family was. If you recollect Lata's story, the pastor who was maligned as being a sexual predator was this woman's husband. This was a family that completely submitted to the will of the church at the expense of hurting their own family members. They were used by Joe and his family in every way possible to expand this church's empire in the then combined Andhra Pradesh. They left their families and relatives believing that they are doing so to do the will of God. It took them 30 plus years to get jolted off their ignorance, to realize that they were tricked by Joe's family, which preyed on them and played with their lives to their heart's content. It was a bit late in the game for this woman to get out of the clutches of this church, as there was a lot of collateral damage, as this family happened to be the pastor's family that was instrumental in recruiting thousands of people to become part of this church. While she and her husband salvaged themselves out and rescued their own souls, a lot of unfortunate ones whom they made members of this church were left behind. My father happens to be one of those who was left behind to the wolves of Joe's family after this couple were mercilessly thrown out of this church. I will come back and shed more light on my dad's servitude to this church and his failed attempts to make us children submit to these draconian church leaders, for which we continue to pay a price. At least my mother continues to pay a price.